This is the Defenders podcast on TV Podcast Industries. We're talking about the penultimate episode of What If Season 2, What If The Avengers Assembled in 1602.
But now, after weeks of trial and error, she stands alone. A failure and an outlaw in the dying universe she was summoned to save. On the run, with no way home, no place to go, nothing.
I can hear you, you know.
Wait, really? You can't?
Well, I mean, sometimes, yes. Do you need something? I'm kind of busy.
Peggy, you don't belong here. You're fighting a battle you can't possibly understand.
Oh, really? Well, the way I figure it, 2 time periods, the 1600s and the early 21st century, have been compressed, stuck together like 2 pieces of gum.
Okay. You do know. Impressive.
And if I don't find a way to unstick these time periods, this universe will shatter.
Welcome back, fellow Defenders, to Defenders Podcast on TV Podcast Industries. We're back for the penultimate episode of What If Season 2. We're talking about What If The Avengers Assembled in 1602. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hey, nonny, fellow Defenders. I'm one of your hosts, John.
And rounding out this trio of Elizibethan, how now, brown cow, Marvel fans, I'm Chris.
Hark, I hear the other voice of Chris has joined us.
Thus, what is going on?
I have journeyed high and low, back and forth, up and down, lefteth and righteth.
And forwardeth and backwith.
Yeah.
Backwith.
And many, many ways. Is this a skull I see before me? No, it is my withered facade.
Well, I'm glad to hear you're feeling much better, Chris, after the last couple of weeks.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Welcome back, Chris. Delighted to have you back. I know you've missed out on quite a bit of the podcasting. We've been doing daily podcasts for the last 7 days, Chris.
I know. And I cannot thank you enough. Unfortunately, I was struck down with baby illness, which is basically the babies carry germs and just take down the parents.
Yep.
So I had no voice, which was a mix between, if anyone remembers, Joe the smoker in South Park, who had the little voice machine, and I think it was Joe, pretty sure it was Joe, and then a mix between Phoebe with Smelly Cat when she had the flu. It was potentially very charismatic and soothing, but also could have sounded like a guy with a voice box. So we just wanted to save our listeners' ears.
I did ask, was it a sexy voice for podcasting? But Chris said absolutely not. 20-day smoker for an over 80-year-old is what it sounded like. So glad you've had a chance to rest. Have you been enjoying the season so far, Chris?
I have. It's been a good one. Again, I yet to see my Spider-Man, which is kind of always a piece where I'm like, well, where's my spider? Where's my zombie hunter? Give me more. So we will see. Hopefully he returns in the finale.
I'm sorry to disappoint you, Chris. He was only scheduled for season 1. We're not going to get him in season 2 at all.
Oh no.
It is a shame.
It is.
Because I did
Maybe
like
season
him.
3.
Yeah, I did like having old Spidey in there.
Yeah, it was fun in season 1. But yeah, maybe he'll be back for season 3, which is confirmed and is currently being made, of course, as we know. So, but we do have a really fun episode to talk about this time, one that we've all been waiting for. What If The Avengers Assembled in 1602? Taking inspiration from Neil Gaiman's, wonderful comic book series from 2002 called, of course, 1602. So taking a bit of inspiration, not the storyline, but at least some of the setting.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
At least the year.
A little mixing of timelines, I think, going on in this. I think there was the Robin Hood reference there with Roger's Hood. Of course, that's about Richard III era, so like the 12th century maybe.
Yep.
And then obviously 1602 Elizabethan. I've heard stuff about it being the Victorian era, which it certainly ain't.
Definitely
Although Maybe Tony's box is a little cyberpunky, I guess, a little bit. And then even with Banner, the prisoner in the Iron Mask, I mean, that's kind of like, is that 17th or 18th century France?
I think the book was.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the setting was.
No, I
can't
remember now.
But
it felt more Cavalier kind of era, you know?
Yes. Yeah. But if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, by now, go over to tvpodcastindustries.com. You can subscribe to hear the podcast through any mysterious podcast player in the multiverse. We do have time for some final bits of feedback from you. If you want to email us, you can email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com or pop on over to our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. You see spoiler posts up there for each and every episode of What If Season 2. And just a reminder, we are staying in the MCU. Next week, Echo is coming to Disney Plus. We'll have all 5 episodes coming out on the 10th of January.
It is. Yeah. It is.
But we are going to record an episode a week of Echo, so we will hopefully have the first episode up just after the show gets released, and then we'll have an episode every week onwards. So we want to hear your feedback on that show as well.
We do.
This joke is going to go on for a whole season.
It really is.
No.
This makes me want to record the entire episode of 5 episodes of Echo in one episode, just so I don't have to hear the joke every week. Anyway, let's get into our discussion about this episode of What If Season 2, Episode 8. Executive producers for the show, of course, once again, are Bryan Andrews, AC Bradley, and Brad Winderbaum, with Kevin Feige. The head writer for this season of the show is AC Bradley, who has written this episode along with Ryan Little, who wrote the Kahori episode earlier on in the season. And, of course, this episode directed by Bryan Andrews, who's directed each of the episodes other than episode 1.
Excellent stuff, yeah. Good to have Ryan Little back as well. Mm-hmm. The Kahori episode was excellent.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, really good.
Total standout of the season so far, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, certainly one of them. Mm-hmm. I've had quite a few, to be honest. But yeah.
Absolutely. But John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for this episode of What If?
Sure. After arriving in 1602, an Elizabethan-era universe, Captain Carter agrees to help Wanda, Merlin, and Sir Nicholas Fury stop an impending incursion. As a tear in space opens over the Globe Theatre, she saves Prince Hamlet, aka Prince Loki, from being pulled into a tear, but fails to save Queen Hela. The loss of the Queen enrages her successor, the new King Thor Odinson, who orders Sir Harold the Happy Hogan to hunt the outlaw Carter. Carter learns from the Watcher that the incursion is occurring due to the presence of the Forerunner, another time-displaced individual, and locates Tony Stark, who can make a device to identify the Forerunner using the Time Stone in Thor's scepter. He points her towards outlaws Rogers Hood and his band of merry men, Bucky Barnes and Scott Lang, to help steal it. Carter finds the group, but they are ambushed by Hogan. Carter gives herself up before freeing herself and enraging an iron-masked Bruce Banner. They meet with Stark and join Rogers' group in infiltrating Thor's court. With Wanda's help, the group retrieves the Time Stone for Stark's device. Managing to activate the device, it identifies Rogers as the Forerunner, who had inadvertently created the temporal anomaly while battling Thanos. Carter bids farewell to Rogers and returns him to his universe, preventing the incursion. Left and isolated in 1602, Peggy Carter is joined in a local pub by an unexpected friend and ally, Dr. Stephen Strange Supreme.
He's back.
He certainly is.
Yeah, traveling in time and space across all of these episodes as the post-credit.
Yes, he is back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see what happens with him in the final episode. But, as always happens when we have a structure for our episodes on TV Podcast Industries, it gets entirely broken by the end of the season. So it's happened again, guys. We have our structure for our episode, which is where have we seen this all before? In other words, what MCU movies is it based on? What's the small change, the premise of the episode? And what if the universe was changed forever? And all of those are pretty much broken by this episode, because there is a small change that happens. The small change is that during the Battle of Wakanda, during the Infinity War, Steve facing down Thanos, he breaks the Infinity Stone, or one of the Infinity Stones, and merges these two places together, 1602.
It's the Time Stone.
And that battle, it's the Time Stone. So that's the big change that happens, or the small change that happens that creates this. But other than that, there's no other MCU movies as such referenced within this, or are there? Are there any that I missed?
It's more internal referencing from What If, in that it is Peggy Carter, the soldier out of time, displaced in time and through time, moving, universe hopping effectively, through, in a sense, no fault of her own. But, and in this case, we saw her, being dragged through this red portal, created by Merlin Wanda in the previous episode, in a car park.
Yeah.
Good job the car didn't also get pulled through as well.
I really wanted it to, because then you would have got an evil Army of Darkness, Evil Dead reference. That's what I was thinking was going to happen. I was like, oh no, okay, damn.
I know, exactly, which would have been quite good. Okay. So there's all that internal referencing, ultimately, within this episode. But outside of that, I guess Neil Gaiman, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Which it kind of is and kind of isn't. Like you said, it pulls from the name 1602.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It takes some kind of like Fury being Sir Nicholas, and kind of that being pulled in. So there's some characters being kind of mentioned, but it really is a light touch reference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For those who have read Neil Gaiman 1602.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's not consistent. I think that was what I was getting at with, like, having the Rogers Hood and the Robin Hood reference.
Mm-hmm.
It's not consistent for 1602.
Yeah.
But then it's a What If universe as well. So it could have been, what if Robin Hood was Rogers Hood, transported from, Richard the First time to Elizabethan England.
Exactly.
So it's not, it's a little inconsistent in its time point, but nonetheless, I understand why they would have that band of merry men and would reference Robin Hood, Yeah,
absolutely. And I think the big difference between 1602, Marvel 1602, and this version in What If really is that 1602 had Marvel characters playing famous characters from that point in history, very specifically. We did have Queen Elizabeth, but everybody around her in her court were major characters from the Marvel universe. So, they were direct references to historical figures. Whereas here it's more like, what would happen if Tony Stark was in 1602 and he's still Tony Stark? What would happen if Scott Lang was in 1602? It really doesn't take anything of the characters that would have been alive at the time. It's a big difference.
I mean, it still links to kind of that main protagonist, though, in terms of who the Forerunner is to some extent. I mean, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it took the history of that period and put it in a superhero sort of element to it. So like Peter Parquet was fantastic, was still the web slinger, but just in Elizabethan England.
Yes.
But like you say, Colonel Fury or Sir Nicholas was referencing Walsingham, the sort of chief security aide of Elizabeth. Yes. And there was the Spanish Inquisition and the New World, which was all happening in that period, that swashbuckling. So I totally get what you mean. It kind of, that's what I mean. There's that inconsistency within this, which isn't, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying in that sense, it doesn't follow 1602. At all. But then, as I say, it's also a what if.
Absolutely. We definitely weren't expecting to have the 1602 story just appear on screen in a half-hour episode. Hopefully someday we'll get that.
I was going to ask that. Looking back, based on what Neil Gaiman's given us with, say, our Sandman Netflix adaptation, which is a very direct reference and kind of translation of his actual comic book, I still think potentially 1602 could work as like a 8-episode kind of animated one-off limited run series type thing.
Definitely.
I think enough of the people now will have reference in, say, 2 to 3 years. They'll have more references to the X-Men. They'll have reference to the Fantastic Four. You'll have more of that Marvel universe.
Definitely.
From a cinematic sense built. I think they could
And there's lots of enough references happening, like you say, the Spanish Inquisition with the X-Men, where, you could really go into that more, and also with the New World stuff. And I think certainly as well, maybe one of the adaptations they could do to it is bring in Kahori, say, for example, as well.
Potentially.
So I would love to see that. I have to say, 8 to 10 sort of episode animation, live action. I
can imagine it being an animation. It's just something that Marvel has never really lent into. The Marvel Studios very much has taken inspiration from their comic book works, and the comic books say as the comic books. It's very much a DC thing to do a direct translation from the comic into animated, and they've been really successful. That's some great DC animated movies based on exact comic arcs, or as close to as they could at the time. I'd love to see 1602 adapted into an animated show. But the fact that they've made this reference to it, they've connected to it, hopefully that'll draw more people out to read the comic book, because the comic book is the comic book. I just don't know whether you'd be able to nail it in animated, and I'm not sure whether Marvel will go that way, especially now as I think the diversification of Marvel is going to be clamped down on even more as the years go on, with less properties coming out rather than a bigger expansion to the universe. But animated sounds like a great idea, doing an animated special. 1602, maybe this will inspire that in the future, kind of like a Roboros, right? Kind of like the snake eating its own tail. 1602 in What If, based off the comic, and then that inspiring the animated show coming out of it in the future.
Marvel Zombies.
Yeah, we are getting Marvel Zombies, exactly.
There's always
coming up. Hopefully this year we're going to get Marvel Zombies, a spin-off from last year's What If. Maybe a 1602 show would be the spin-off from this one. Is there anything else referenced in here? Any other references you guys picked up to movies, or even things that are said, anything that happens in the episode that you guys picked up?
I mean, other than Robin Hood and the Man in the Iron Mask, in terms of literary or folklore tales, there's those for sure.
Yeah, we've got the Globe with Shakespeare and Loki doing Hamlet, and we've got or a version of Hamlet.
Yeah, he's doing Willie Shakes.
He is. Yeah. And probably taken directly from Tom Hiddleston doing loads and loads of Hamlet over the years. He's a very well-known Shakespeare actor. So having him on screen doing Shakespeare at the opening of the episode is quite cool.
Yeah. And then it's self-referential. It pulls on this new purple Happy Hogan.
Yeah.
The happiest of Hulks, if you will. Yeah. Which is fun. That's a nice callback as well, in that, like, it's not just the only one. Obviously we have Captain Carter, but that just being called back is a fun reference, I think, now, because I think they may try and keep Happy like that.
Yeah. The MCU's Hulk Hogan is back for this episode.
Absolutely. I loved his quippy, sort of pithy remarks all the way through as well. I thought that was quite good. Certainly sort of in the big court battle where he's fighting Banner and Scott Lang and stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Using all the ye olde terms to sort of put down his the person who he was fighting at the time. I thought that was quite good.
I like throughout that everybody knows this is what happens to Happy Hogan, that he will turn into a monster if you get him angry. So everybody's trying to just keep calm around him until they really need it to happen.
Well, that's it. When Thor says right at the start, after just being sort of crowned king, mind your affliction.
Yes. Yeah.
It was good.
Could that be a reference to Jekyll and Hyde, maybe, since there's a couple of other literary references in here? That'd be a little reference to that, maybe.
Well, possibly in this day. Yeah, I guess so.
Thinking something like that.
Then
of course,
there would be a Victorian bit in there as well.
Yeah, potentially. But again, this is a created universe. The only other one that I wanted to point out is just a very specific reference, because Captain Carter has followed the mold of Steve Rogers throughout her appearances. She's had a lot of the same storylines that he's had. I just liked that there is a moment with Rogers Hood asking Peggy Carter to describe the Steve Rogers from her world, and she says, "I don't think I will." That's the response that Steve Rogers gave to Falcon when he met back up with him at the end of Avengers Endgame. He said he wasn't going to tell him about his life with Peggy Carter. So I just like that Peggy got that line about her Steve Rogers.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah,
it's quite cool. And our third point usually is what if the universe was changed forever? And interestingly, this episode, effectively, Peggy saves this universe, unmerges the two worlds, saves everything, returns everything to the way it was. So absolutely nothing would be different, other than Peggy is stuck in 1602 at the end of the episode. So there's nothing actually changed. Everything goes back to the way it was beforehand.
Well, I like that they implicitly reference here that it's an incursion, effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
Which, we saw at the end of Multiverse of Madness.
Yes, we did.
So far it's been about changing a universe in the multiverse and changing some aspect of it. It's only been Peggy's through line where she has effectively traveled through those barriers between the different universes, but effectively here the great tragedy of the 1602 world is that there is an incursion with, as we find out, Steve Rogers' universe from whence he came so that process is happening, is being referenced here as well, which is interesting because it's I think the only other reference since the end credits of Multiverse of Madness where we've had that, and I kind of do feel that's probably where the MCU is going ultimately.
Yeah, and incursions are really important in Marvel Comics. That's kind of how we got the ultimate universe of Marvel connecting and being part of the central comic book universe. This idea of these two worlds colliding against each other. Some people on one universe get saved while it merges with the other universe, or they all get destroyed. So we hear that from the Watcher throughout this. He's seen millions of different realities collapse and fall apart and be destroyed over time. What makes 1602 so special in this case? So that's quite interesting that they do reference incursions between two worlds here. So it may become a much bigger thing with the Marvel Universe going on. It's how the Fantastic Four were reintroduced into the main Marvel world. So they were quite central to that story as well. So yeah, that's since Fantastic Four are coming up in the MCU, it's maybe laying some groundwork to get the idea of incursions back into people's minds as the rest of the saga continues.
The way I guess, or the way I have a feeling what is going on in the MCU, especially now that the What If has, for these first few episodes, really kind of lent into the multiversal Watcher, and he's talking about coming and goings and realities starting and stopping and dying and everything. I get the feeling that, unlike some of the previous which we know about the MCU, where it was like, all right, we'll write the Infinity Stones in as we go along and see where we get to after 10 years, that type of, it was planned, but like not as. I get the feeling Incursions was very much a targeted wording, targeted approach, and some of the Watcher's lines here were pointed. So again, a nod to us who do follow like a rabid dog, going, oh my god, did you hear what they said there? And it's gone, this slobbering, going, oh, this is so good. But for anyone just a casual watcher, they enjoy it because they understand. It's now been said in the Multiverse of Madness. It's been said in Loki. It's been said in all these different places. So the casual users go, I kind of get what's going on. So I feel it is now being a more common lexicon for the standard MCU watcher versus us who podcast about it, talk it, listen about it, like very much devour the content.
Or at least it will start to be. I think that's one of the things as we get deeper and deeper into the multiversal saga, as this part of the MCU is called, but people will be able to come back and reference these points where they've mentioned incursions.
Well, it's like, we get here the Watcher saying that some worlds in the multiverse are meant to die. And that's ultimately what happens in an incursion. You get these kind of mergings when certain worlds survive over others. So yeah, like I thought that was really good. I think the other side of this that I really liked was just having Peggy sort of being brought to the world of 1602 as their savior, and then ultimately being seen as a failure by Thor because Hela is taken through that tear that happens, and then an outlaw. But she's got that real kind of Peggy Carter thing where she wants to see it through. So come hell or high water, even though the forces of King Thor Odinson are ranged against her, she's wanting to sort of finish this through.
Absolutely.
And I think like the things I really liked, as you said, was, you know, just the melancholiness of her with Steve Rogers. Like you talked about her not wanting to describe her Steve Rogers, but even then, when in Thor's court and they have activated the device, they've identified him as the Forerunner, and you have Thor saying, "Finish the job, you've now got to send him away." And you know, she's just, it's very melancholy. It's like, will we ever get a happy ending? So I loved that kind of sense of, you know, these star-crossed lovers that ultimately never seem to catch a break. Thought that was really kind of sort of, it's poignant, really, I think, for Peggy's character. And I loved her interaction with Tony Stark. I loved him sort of when she said radioactive, he goes, "Radio what? I love your made up words, your beautiful gibberish." It was really good Tony Stark again. I love the way he's been written in this series of What If. Just kind of, he's kind of like he's had too much sugar. You know, he's just had way too much sugar and he just can't keep himself contained at all.
Way too much alcohol.
Well, in this case, I guess grain alcohol.
Yes, he does give alcohol at 11 o'clock in the morning to Bruce Banner to try and sort out his issues, because it solves all of life's problems, at least in this case for Tony. But he is a lot of fun, isn't he, Tony Stark in here? I love that he's still the inventor, but I like that he's taken a little bit of guidance from Peggy Carter in here as well. As I say, since this has broken our format and we're not able to talk about it in the same way as we normally do, let's just talk about the episode itself. Any things that stood out to you, any moments that you really enjoyed from the episode as well. Chris, anything that jumped out to you that you liked about the episode?
Personally, just the ending, the actual banquet fight, or the banquet, the banquet hall fight, I should say. Really just showing all the different superpowered kind of heroes and villains, I would say that, using their different powers. And again, with this animation style, they really go hard on, like, if it's a visceral, realistic almost. It suits the MCU style, and in terms of when they're doing fight, it would be almost as if it was a standard camera pan, a Russo camera pan. When you had Roger Hood kind of battling and having his piece, I enjoyed that, and I did enjoy the ending, the choice to make the Forerunner Rogers and having that connection point, like that. So that culminating 8 minutes of a kind of finale, for me, was just really fun. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
No, I'm the same. I really loved the action. I loved the fights here. The court, where they infiltrate the court and that I really enjoyed. And Rogers Hood's, sort of tree houses as well, which were overly ornate. But I loved
that definitely stood out as not a very secure secret hideout.
Exactly. But the fight scenes there, like, I loved the Royal Yellow Jackets, and you get the Destroyer from Thor. Yeah. So actually Thor is referenced the movie, at least in terms of
the Destroyer, yes.
The Destroyer. Yeah. And guess there's also Ant-Man with Darren Cross as well, with the Yellow Jackets, the Royal Yellow Jackets, kind of referencing that, because, I mean, you even hear Scott Lang saying, you know, "I hate copycats."
Yes.
Which I thought was quite good.
So in this universe, Darren Cross has been successful at creating lots of armor for an armed force,
somewhere.
I guess.
Exactly.
At some point,
I also did like the nice little reference to Red Skull as the Royal Executioner, sharpening his axe there in the moonlight at the Tower of London. I thought that was a good use of the Red Skull.
And you did see him for a quick moment in the battle as well, didn't you? He was taken out pretty quickly, but you did see him for a quick moment in there. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, it was really good. And I think the only other big thing, it was that Peggy can hear the Watcher.
Yes.
So that is, that's just a nice little moment where she just says, you know, "Oh, is it you again?" You know?
Yeah.
And is able to learn, you know, the fact that, as I was saying, you know, that some worlds, are meant to die, but he also does, you know, provide that warning to her. You know, you can't predict the coming events. If you sort of intervene or meddle with this process of incursion happening.
I wonder if that's a hangover from the Guardians of the Multiverse, from him pulling her out of time to become a member of the Guardians of the Multiverse, that she's able to hear him because of that. I wonder if that's part of the reason why she is.
It could be. I mean, season 1, we got a few where Strange hears him narrating and sort of looks around to see who it was, which I loved that idea. Cool. Yeah. So that, just maybe a faint echo, but possibly, it's being enhanced because she is the woman out of time.
Yeah, the woman out of her own reality as well. She never went back to her own time or her own reality in the original series. So I wonder if it was that. One thing that I absolutely loved in the fight scene in the Rogers Hood's secret hideout pub, basically. I loved in that battle we had Peggy and Steve Rogers sharing the shield. How cool was that? As they're bouncing the shield off the Yellow Jackets. Yeah. Steve's picking it up, bouncing it off them, and Peggy's picking it up again. I thought that was so dynamic, so cool to see both of them share the shield. That is absolutely something I would love to have seen in live action. I'd love to see Chris Evans and Haley Atwell side by side bouncing the shield around the place. That would be cool.
They still might. They still might.
Well, I think it's unlikely we're ever getting Chris Evans back in the MCU, but they may retool his model from one of the movies in the past. Maybe do something like that. Cut it together. And then the only other thing that I really liked about the episode as well was Peggy works out the problem here as well. Not only can she hear the Watcher, he's telling the story, he's talking about this dying world, but Peggy works out that it is two worlds that are merged together that she needs to break back apart to save the day, effectively. Yeah. So massively intelligent and massively capable. Good old Captain Carter here. Always there with the plan.
Yeah, really. Absolutely.
Yeah, good stuff. Any notes about the episode? Any little details that you wanted to call out from the episode?
My only piece is if the listeners haven't actually read Neil Gaiman's 1602 to give it a shot. There are some references to this, but don't think that because you've watched this episode, you can and you don't need to go read this comic. There's a collected edition. If enough people buy it, they'll probably do another reprint, but it's definitely your local comic book shop will have it 100%. If you don't, and if you're digital only, Kindle, all Comixology, Amazon, they all have it wherever you like to read your comic books.
They're all the same thing, Chris.
I know. They weren't.
They've merged as well.
They're all the same thing. Just
we need Peggy to unmerge them.
We do. We do. Comixology used to be great, and now it's merged into this really weird hybrid app now, which is really difficult to read on. But you're absolutely right, Chris. Yeah, definitely go read 1602. I think it's one of those graphic novels that I generally recommend about once a year to people to read because it's well worth picking up. I wanted to just call out a couple of little other background nods that they call out in this episode. They're talking about these tears in the universe, these incursions that are pulling and taking away things from this area in 1602. They reference Nebula's observatory, the Isle of Ego, and Groot Grove's winery. All three are gone now. This is the point where Thor breaks. Exactly, where Thor breaks and goes, well, if the wine's gone, this is the end of our world, basically. But I just like it's Isle of Ego. Ego is the living planet, so I like that they've turned it into an isle here on the planet. And of course, Nebula's observatory, because she's one of the Guardians of the Galaxy, so she's got an observatory in this place. So I like that they nod about other characters that are in this world. That's quite cool.
Excellent stuff.
Good stuff. Well, that just leaves us with one thing about the episode. Chris, do you defend Season 2, Episode 8? What if the Avengers Assembled in 1602?
Yes. Plain and simple, yes. It is a fun frolic and romp, and one may say an interesting journey into the unknown of 1602. Even though it might be Elizabethan, Victorian, medieval, wherever you may like to place your English history, it's still 1602. It's fun.
Do you know, I'm going to be really pedantic, Chris, because we talked about this just before the episode. Actually, this era would be called the Hellion era at the beginning of the episode, and then potentially the Thor Odinsonian era because it's about who's who's the ruler, and Elizabeth isn't the queen here.
That is true.
It starts with Hela. So I guess if I was being really pedantic,
and you are,
yes. It's just 1602. But you are absolutely right. It is Elizabethan in our times.
Yes. But overall, fantastic, and I would defend.
Brilliant.
Jonas, would you defend this episode of What If?
Yes, I would defend this episode of What If. I'd give this 4.5 willy shakes out of 5.
Should have asked Dost thou defend this episode.
Dost thou?
of what?
Well, exactly. Yeah, I really liked this. I loved being immersed in 1602 in a What If animation. I thought it was just really, great storytelling. Loved the animation. Loved the action with the fight sequences. Mm-hmm. I loved the melancholy, the sort of hopelessness of Peggy Carter, but and Steve Rogers' relationship. But I love the fact that Peggy Carter is this, hero out of time, this soldier out of time, saving other universes, really heroic. I loved all the different nods, like you said, around the Isle of Ego, but, the Royal Yellow Jackets, the monster in the Iron Mask being the Hulk, all these different things. Absolutely loved. And of course, just to bookend it with, Stephen Strange arriving in the pub where Peggy is sort of drowning her sorrows. So a little bit of a pick-me-up, two of the principal protagonists of the Guardians of the Multiverse sat together in a pub in 1602. So, intrigued to see how that carries on as we have the to be continued. So, really, really enjoyed, this episode of What If.
Yeah. And we haven't really had that technically in any of the other episodes, the to be continued parts. So this is really part 1 and part 2 of the finale. And
absolutely. Yeah. So Derek, with that, do you defend this episode of What If?
I do defend this episode. I really enjoyed it, considering I probably was hoping to see Neil Gaiman's 1602 adapted, and that's not really what happens here. But I think they have a lot of fun with the premise. I think they have a lot of good writing behind it. It's nice to see Bucky and Steve and Scott Lang working together as Robin Hood and his merry men. Effectively, I thought that was a fun little addition to the episode. And one of the other things I really liked was the battle between Thor and Captain Carter, with him with his vibranium sword versus her vibranium shield. So that was a cool little additional touch. Hulk versus Hulk was pretty cool. Hulk versus the Freak, actually, which is why I found out Happy Hogan's Hulk is actually it's a character called the Freak from Marvel Comics as well. So Hulk versus the Freak was very cool. The Yellow Jackets in there was awesome. Some really good, exciting fights. And I think ending with that moment where Peggy has to sacrifice everything and she's now the only hero left in 1602, drowning her sorrows, not really knowing how to get back. I presume the Watcher would actually have given her another opportunity to leave.
I think so, yeah.
He did it like 3 times in the episode, or would he just going, well, you didn't listen to me and you meddled, so I'm not taking you home. Is that it? Your ride's gone, basically. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the final episode as well. Good stuff. Well, goes on to our last question of the episode. What if we had some feedback?
And we do.
First up, we have some feedback from the one and only Coffee and Vodka via email. That is, what would it be? It would be a letter. It would be a carriage, pigeon letter.
Yes.
Carrier pigeon. Sparrow.
Potentially a missive, I guess.
A missive, there you go.
A rider on a horseback rider.
That could work too. First up, as I said, it's from Coffee and Vodka, and it went, greetings, fellow time-displaced defenders. I've got this saying. I'd like to think it is original. It's not what is said or done, but who says or does it. If, for example, you caught Paul Rudd making forceful love to your parents over the still cooling corpse of your siblings, you'd most likely just want to tell him that Quantumania wasn't his fault. By the same token, where the chopped up and truncated formats of episode 2 made it seem like a charming comic book, the same format gave an agonizing taste of what could have been in episode 7. Or the wonderful quip fest of Tony versus the Grandmaster up against the rehash that was Justin versus Happy. 1602 manages to tell a complete tale despite its half-hour confines, with dialogue and plot points that could have felt fan-servicey, but instead were given a fresh shine. They gave us a free-for-all ending that was a brilliant here, which in She-Hulk was rightly played off as overdone. Even Hulk Hogan worked well in this. Loved that feather bit. Funny, tragic, perfectly executed in every conceivable way. This was said and done by the best in the finest way possible. And, as usual, even with stark and stellar form, Loki stole the show. 5+ well-known, ganked Yoriks, unhappy endings, and strange segues out of 5. Peace and take care, coffee and vodka.
Great stuff, coffee and vodka.
Yeah.
I forgot about I forgot to mention the feather bit, which is the final straw for before Happy Hogan explodes into the freak.
The feather that broke the camel's back for old freaky Hogan. Yeah, good stuff, coffee and vodka. Really pleased you enjoyed this episode of What If. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is interesting, isn't it? You know, that half-hour confine, it's one of the things that's just, I mean, I've felt personally all these tales have just been really good. Mm-hmm. I think it's, you know, so much packed into those 30 minutes, just really sort of, top-notch storytelling here.
Absolutely. It's been really good fun to watch these episodes as they've unfolded, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And I suppose it's one of those ones that we've talked about before quite a few times about if you're looking to poke holes in things, you'll probably find those holes to poke at things, right? Whereas if you're really enjoying something, you're probably not going to find those cracks, right?
Yeah.
You're probably not going to find them in the same way. So I'm glad you enjoyed this episode, Coffee and Vodka. Over on our Facebook group, we got a message in from Heather Wallace who says, brilliant episode. I love that Peggy and the Watcher can have a chat and that she could have gone with him but refused. Seeing much loved characters in an historical setting is so much fun. Although they did get people's titles incorrect, it should be Sir Nicholas, not Sir Fury. I mean, it's literally in the Gaiman comic. There was so much to enjoy, from Tom Hiddleston having Loki deliver Shakespearean sonnets to Scott irritating Bucky and some great motivational phrases from Tony. It's decorative and it's only a failure if it explodes will be my go-to work phrases from now on. The eternally star-crossed Steve and Peggy are always so heartbreaking. I really hope there's a happy ending for Peg soon. Once again, bearded Steve is the best Steve, and I can't wait to see the next mystery and what Doctor Strange is up to.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, good stuff. Thanks, Heather. Yes, Tony Stark, fine form again. Mm-hmm. The other one I liked was where, I think when Steve comes into his barn where Peggy is, and he says something to her. I can't remember quite what it is, but Tony goes, I think I would have used a sonnet as well. So I really enjoyed, Tony in this as well.
Absolutely.
And yes. Yeah. Bearded Steve is the best Steve, in the same way that bearded Chris is the best Chris.
The only Chris you'll get.
Exactly.
I love it.
Although I will say, just on the Fury piece,
mm-hmm.
In the MCU, everyone calls him Fury.
Yeah.
They don't call him Nick, so that's why they made this change.
I was positive that was my exact response to Heather over in our Facebook group, Chris.
Hey!
Yeah, then it's potentially because you can't call him Nick in the MCU. It has to be Fury. So, although Heather rightly pointed out that they also call it Sir Happy as well, don't they? For Happy Hogan. So
yeah.
So they just got it wrong. But I think we've got the no prize answer, Chris, for why they were calling him Sir Fury.
Yeah, exactly.
Good stuff.
Thanks, Heather.
Thanks so much, Heather. Also on Facebook, Harvey Locust says the brief shots of Red Skull served as a perfect red herring for the plot twist. I've heard rumours of a surprise 10th episode. Do you think we'll get one like we did with Sandman? Interesting. So, the rumour of the surprise 10th episode is similar to what happened in season 1. There's actually been an episode cut from this season. So the Gamora episode that we got earlier on this season was supposed to be in season 1 when it was originally supposed to be 10 episodes in each season. there's an episode that we've already seen a little bit of preview for, which features Red Guardian and Bucky Barnes in a car together. That was written by A.C. Bradley for season 2, but has been moved into season 3 already.
Okay.
So that's, I think, where that rumor of the extra episode, the extra 10th episode was coming from, but definitely confirmed. And we're about a week out now, from the final episode being released, that this is just a 9-episode, animated series. But I do like the tease of Red Skull. I do wonder if we'll get to see more of him in the finale, or maybe in season 3.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. Thanks so much, Harvey. Also on Facebook, Victor Von Doom says, nice setup for the finale. The animation is top notch. Hogan did not seem so happy in 1602. Loving Hayley Atwell and Jeffrey Wright in this series. Yeah, they've been superb. And I think just them having the conversation together as well was just a really good touch to have those two, sort of interacting, in the animation. And certainly, Hogan was not happy at all. He was hilarious, actually, just because totally sort of against character, really. Really enjoyed Happy Hogan in 1602. Good stuff, Victor. And finally on Facebook, we have Joel Sharpton, who says, what a fantastic episode. Wish we had a bit more of the characters from the 1602 series, as their Daredevil is one of my favourites especially. Great connections to the rest of the show so far, and a good tease for what's to come. Thanks, Joel.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. I too loved that Daredevil as well. I assume it's just because the MCU's Daredevil is still not fully MCU'd. It's still basically the Netflix version, and She-Hulk, and soon to be Echo.
Yeah.
And then when he gets his own show, Born Again, I'd say that's in those future what ifs we may get him.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah,
I think so. It's like as if they've been given the mandate that you can look back at the history of the MCU and you can tell stories in the things we've already told, but don't tell anything of the future of the MCU. Don't bring in a character first here other than Kaori, which will be interesting to see how she plays out in the future. But yeah, it would have been cool. And we have talked about it earlier on, Joel. It would have been cool to see an animated movie of 1602. It's such a great storyline and would feature so many characters that we all love. So hopefully we might get that in the future. But yeah, it's unlikely they'd bring in Peter Parker and Daredevil into this version of the story in just the half hour they had. I think they stuffed in loads in there, didn't they?
Yeah.
Great stuff. Thanks so much for all of your feedback on this episode. And we do have an email in from Heather Wallace. Heather says, Dear Chris, Derek and John, Happy New Year and wishing you all a wonderful and wondrous 2024. Thank you for your great work on the podcast in 2023. You covered such a large number of shows, often simultaneously and in tight time frames, always maintaining high quality and great enthusiasm. It's such a pleasure to listen to you, and I am in awe that you do all this while still having demanding day jobs. I learned so much listening to you all, things I didn't know about the various productions, Easter eggs, and even plot points. I'm loving the daily podcasts on Marvel's What If. I love the show. I think it's my favourite of everything you've covered this year. And hearing your commentary every day is an extra special holiday treat. I'm lucky enough to still be on holidays, and your podcast has become part of my morning schedule. I hope Chris feels better soon and your dynamic trio will be reunited. All the very best, Heather.
Thank you so much, Heather, for the email. Really, really good. And thank you for listening. And we're really glad you're enjoying our podcasts, and in particular, our current one with What If is being such a part of your morning ritual. Yeah. And I'm glad that Chris is back as well.
Me too.
And the dynamic trio is back for these final 2 episodes of What If for you.
Yeah.
I do feel if it's the dynamic duo, actually it's the terrifying trio. When the 3 of us come together.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Heather. It means a lot to getting emails like this, and how much we kind of just become a part of your routine and how much you guys enjoy. We do have demanding jobs, but we also love doing this, and it's a great way to hang out with our friends.
Absolutely.
You guys and each other.
Yep, absolutely. And this is the first time we've ever done daily podcasting. We've never done it before. So, and we won't be doing it after the end of this season either. 9 episodes in a row is a lot to do after we've been on holidays and while we're back at work as well, or at least I'm back at work at the moment. So,
yes.
It's a lot to manage, but 2 episodes to go. So, have been really enjoying it, and getting through the content this quickly has been pretty shocking. Getting through the season this quickly has been pretty shocking.
Yes, Heather, snap. Yeah. I'm also still on holidays.
Mm-hmm. I should be getting you to edit the podcast, John, this time, Brett.
Yes.
Oh, that's why you should have said nothing.
Yes, as always, Heather, Soccer Moms, Wallace, it's always great to get your feedback in, and it means a lot. Maybe we should also call you Heather Bearded Steve is the best, Wallace.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's the other little moniker we'll go by.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks so much for all of your feedback. If you want to email us, you can email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com, or pop on over to our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. And as we've been saying, we're now up on Threads. We're trying to get rid of that Twitter account. So please come follow us on Threads so that we can use polls and do all that fun stuff that we used to do on Twitter, so it can become our X.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's make Twitter our X.
Absolutely. We'll be back tomorrow with our chat about What If Season 2, the finale, Episode 9, What If Strange Supreme intervened.
Ooh.
Thank you so much, and we'll speak to you again tomorrow. Bye.
Yes, thank you so much, fellow defenders, for joining us. As always, a pleasure. Until Episode 9 of What If, keep watching, keep listening, and of course, keep defending.
Bye.
Bye.
Exit stage left.
Pursued by bear.
Bye. Run.